From preschool preaching to standing alongside Dr. Martin Luther King, the man they called the Wonder Boy Preacher has always followed his faith. Now, a lifetime of civil rights activism later, the Reverend Al Sharpton's calling to social justice is even stronger than ever. Raphael Rowe went to meet him to hear about survival, forgiveness, and why he went from preacher to protester.
And no matter what our politics are, if it had not been for God, we would not be here. And to him, we should give the glory. Michael Brown does not want to be remembered for a riot. He wants to be remembered as the one that made America deal with how we going to police in the United States.
Your career, your faith-based career, started when you were very young. Tell me about that and how old you were at the time.
My parents were Pentecostal fundamentalist Christian. And we went to a Pentecostal church. And I used to go home after a church service on Sunday at 3 years old. And I'd line up my sister's dolls and I would preach the sermon I just heard the bishop preach. And I preached my first sermon publicly when I was 4. It was about 900 people there.
Can you remember it?
St. John's 14th chapter, 1st verse. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. That was my first sermon. And by the time I was 7, I was known as the Wonder Boy Preacher. When I was 9, my father abandoned us, and we ended up moving from this nice, beautiful home into the middle of the ghetto. And I think it was my mother's faith and mine that sustained us through that trauma.
An amazing story.
I think it's what we call a calling. And I knew that was what I was born to do. I just knew it.
And you went on to become a prominent civil rights political activist. How young were you when that took shape?
About 11 or 12. My mother became very alarmed because she thought I was going to leave the church because I wanted to go to these protest meetings and rallies. And that was my ministry. My civil rights work was my ministry, trained by the lieutenants of Dr. Martin Luther King.
For a man of such faith, how can you marry what you believe and yet what you witness in terms of racial discrimination and injustice?
They all one to me. My ministry is social justice. I believe you have an obligation to do righteousness in the social order from your moral and spiritual commitment, including working with people that don't have a spiritual or moral commitment. You're not judged by who you work with or for, you're judged by what you do.
How do you answer those who say, why does God allow the injustice in the world?
God is not your valet to come in and clean up the room or the nation after you mess it up. But every time I get doubtful, every time I question things, I think about things that I've seen with my own eyes. I was in the square in Johannesburg the night they lowered the flag of apartheid and raised the ANC flag, and Nelson Mandela went from prisoner to president. I never thought I'd see that. I sat on the stage and watched a brown hand of Barack Obama go on the Bible of Martin Luther King and be sworn in the President of the United States. I was sitting a few feet away. So I've seen too much not to know what can happen that we never believed would happen.
And you mentioned Barack Obama. He called you when he became the President of America. What was your relationship like with such a man?
I think the thing that got us close is I never expected him to be an activist like me, and he never expected me to be an insider. And both of us kind of understood we had different roles. I remember one of his top aides once said to me, why are you always so brutally honest in the meetings? Because I was always the guy that was more like on it. He would disagree with us in private. Very self-assured, and probably one of the brightest people I've ever met, and I met a lot of people.
You've also known the present president, Donald Trump, for a very long time, and you've been quite a hard critic of his.
Donald Trump, I think, has done serious damage to race relations in the United States. He started his political notoriety by advocating birtherism, that President Obama was not a real American. That's what gave him a political following. He was just a celebrity builder before that. It was us against them from the beginning. And then when he wins, he goes after anything President Obama did. And I think that what has really been damaging is he's put federal judges on the bench that are voting against voting rights and voting against health care that will last longer than his presidency. So he has done real damage. A lot that I and others have fought for is on the brink of being lost or has been lost. But if you study history, there's always been the move forward and then backlash.
What is your message to Donald Trump, President of America?
That you have achieved wealth and power, but it will give you a legacy that your children's children will be ashamed of if you use it to pit people against each other and to bring us backwards in terms of human progress rather than forward. Nobody remembers wealthy, powerful people for their wealth and power. People remember you for what you represented in terms of your values and what you did for people. And he has neither.
Why was you invited to England to address black leaders in Parliament? A man who spent 50 years of his life fighting racial inequality and injustice, etc. It just seems bizarre that right now they still need people to come and talk about issues to do with knife crime, gun crime, and targeting of young black men. Does that not depress you?
It depresses me in the sense that here we are again, but it also challenges me, saying, but maybe that's why you're still here, because you fought a lot of these battles and you can share your experiences. I have survived spending days in jail fighting civil rights. So one time 3 months I spent, another couple of times 30 days each. I've survived a man stabbing me, leading a march, and I forgave him. For me to have survived all I did, to me, was God leaving me here for a reason. And part of the reason is that when they try to take it all back, some of us are here to say, don't let them take it back. And this is how we can fight back.
Rev. Al Sharpton, thank you very much.
Thank you. This was good.